Imagine a winter night in a quiet town where snow whispers across empty streets, and a police officer discovers a lonely German shepherd standing beneath a street lamp, waiting for someone who has not arrived. No barking, no fear, just those deep amber eyes that seem to be searching for a friend. This chance encounter will lead to a bond so powerful that it transforms not just a family, but an entire hospital full of children. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you are watching from. I love knowing how far these stories travel. And please remember to press subscribe to support the channel so we can keep bringing you more heartfelt stories like this. Snow fell on Winterfield the way ash falls after a long forgotten fire, slow, steady, and strangely quiet. It was close to 11 at night, the kind of hour when most windows in town had already gone dark, leaving only a few squares of warm light clinging to the old brick buildings downtown. The streets were mostly empty, the usual hum of traffic replaced by the soft crunch of snow settling over everything, burying the day under a blanket of white. Patrol Car 27 rolled along Maple Avenue at a patient speed, tires whispering over the slush. Officer Liam Carter kept one gloved hand resting lightly on the steering wheel. He was 35, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of build that came from years of wearing body armor and hauling people out of bad situations. His hair was dark brown, clipped short in the way cops and soldiers often favored, and a faint shadow of stubble lined his jaw. Not messy, just perpetually 5 minutes past a clean shave. His eyes, a muted gray blue, held the weariness of someone who had seen too many 3 a.m. calls end with paperwork and heartache. Liam had the air of a man who used to laugh easily, but had learned to keep his humor on a shorter leash. Before joining the Winterfield Police Department, he'd served as an MP in the Army, stationed overseas in a desert that felt like the opposite of nights like this. There had been one patrol, one wrong turn, one delayed call for backup, that ended with a friend zipped into a black bag. Since then, Liam carried his duty with the quiet seriousness of someone who no longer believed bad things only happened to other people. He loved his job, but it was a complicated love, like loving a storm you knew could still knock your house down. The radio murmured with the occasional dispatch. A minor fender bender reported and resolved, a noise complaint from an apartment above a bar, nothing urgent enough to stir the calm of his current route. The inside of the car was warm. The heater hummed and the dashboard cast a soft green glow across his gloved hands. Outside, Winterfield looked almost gentle in the falling snow, the same town that, in daylight, wore its small-town weariness openly. Chipped paint on porches, old factory buildings repurposed as storage, and the quiet ache of people working too hard for too little. Liam turned onto a side street lined with old street lamps, the kind that gave off a soft, yellow light that didn't so much banish the dark as negotiate with it. That was when he saw the shape under the lamp. At first he thought it might be a trash bag, half buried in snow, or maybe a drunk who had decided the curb was as good a place as any to sleep it off. But as the headlights swept closer, the shape resolved into a body, not human, but unmistakably alive. A dog. Liam slowed the cruiser and pulled to a stop a few yards away. The engine idled, sending a faint vibration through the steering wheel. Under the soft halo of the street lamp stood a German shepherd. He was large, maybe around 4 years old, with a thick black and tan coat dusted in white. Snowflakes clung to his fur like tiny stars caught in dark clouds. His ears stood alert, but not aggressively so, more like a sentry on duty than a fighter about to strike. There were signs of wear on him, a faint scar tracing along his left hind leg, a slightly rough patch of fur where an old wound had once been. He wasn't shaking in panic, just shivering in the cold, the way any living creature would in that wind. And his eyes, a deep, intelligent amber, followed the patrol car with a stillness that made Liam sit up a little straighter. Most stray dogs he encountered either bolted into the shadows or barked furiously on instinct. This one didn't do either. He simply watched. Liam flicked on his hazard lights, threw the car into park, and took a breath. He felt the familiar tug of protocol in his head. Unknown animal, potential danger, call animal control, stand clear. But there was also the quiet pull of something older, something that existed long before policy manuals. The sight of a living creature standing alone in a storm, clearly not built for this kind of cold in the middle of the night. "All right, buddy," he muttered to himself, voice muffled behind the soft crackle of the radio. "Let's not do anything stupid." He grabbed a pair of leather gloves from the passenger seat, pulled them on, and stepped out into the wind. The cold slapped him in the face the way only winter wind could, slicing right through the thin gaps in his uniform. Snow hissed under his boots as he closed the car door with a quiet thud. His breath burst into small clouds before him as he moved slowly toward the street lamp. The dog didn't back away. He didn't advance either. He simply shifted his weight, paws sinking a little deeper into the snow, his gaze fixed on Liam with a quiet alertness, as if he was weighing the man walking toward him. Up close, Liam could see more details. The dog wore a faded collar, the leather worn and cracked, as if it had seen years of weather and use. A small metal tag hung from it, its surface scratched and dull. His ribs weren't sharply visible, which suggested he hadn't been starving for long. But he had the raw look of an animal that had been without shelter for at least a few days. Fur clumped slightly from melted and refrozen snow, paws reddened from the cold. Liam softened his posture, lowering his shoulders, tilting his body just enough to seem less imposing. "Hey there," he said quietly, letting his voice carry gently through the snow. He had a good voice for nights like this, low, steady, the same tone he used with kids who had seen too much at a domestic call. "You picked a lousy night to be out here, didn't you?" The dog's ears flicked slightly at the sound of his voice. He blinked once, slow. It wasn't fear in his eyes, Liam realized. It was assessment. The same kind of look he'd seen in seasoned officers during a tense call. A silent, measured reading of the room. Liam stopped a few feet away, not reaching out yet. He'd seen enough bites to know better than to rush. The dog tilted his head, then glanced past Liam toward the patrol car, the warm interior glowing faintly in the dark. For a moment, the scene felt oddly mythic, a lone guardian under a circle of light, a traveler on the road, a choice suspended in the air between them. Somewhere deep in his chest, Liam felt the familiar pinch of memory. Another winter night years ago. A different road, flashing lights painting the snow red and blue. A broken voice on the radio saying they were too late. He pushed the memory aside, like you push a door closed against the wind, and focused on the animal before him. "Look," he said softly, voice almost conversational. "I don't know what your story is, but I'm not leaving you out here to freeze. Not on my watch." He extended one gloved hand, palm open, fingers relaxed. The dog lowered his head slightly, nostrils flaring as he took in the scent of leather, snow, and the faint smell of coffee that clung to the fabric of Liam's jacket. There was a tense, silent beat, the world holding its breath. And then the dog took one step forward. Just one. "That's it," Liam murmured, a tiny smile ghosting over his lips. "Easy, big guy." The dog closed the gap between them, not lunging, not snapping, just walking, as if he'd finally made a decision. He sniffed Liam's hand, then the edge of his uniform, then looked up directly into his eyes. Up close, that gaze was even more intense. There was something heartbreakingly human in it. Confusion, endurance, and a cautious, battered kind of hope. Liam had seen that expression before, on kids sitting on the back bumper of an ambulance, wrapped in blankets after a house fire. The unspoken question was always the same. "Can I trust you?" Another gust of wind cut through them, making the snow swirl harder around the street lamp. Liam could feel the cold creeping through his boots, biting at his toes, but the dog just stood there, stoic, fur rippling against the gusts. "You're stubborn," Liam muttered. "You'll fit right in." He angled his body slightly toward the patrol car and took a slow step backward. The dog watched. Liam took another step. The dog's ears tipped forward, then he glanced at the car again, then back at Liam. "Come on," Liam said, voice a touch firmer now, but still gentle. "Let's get you warm." What happened next felt almost surreal in its simplicity. The dog moved, not in a frantic burst, not with the hesitant, half-startled trot of a stray being coaxed into a trap, but with a quiet, deliberate pace. Step by step, he followed Liam through the snow toward the patrol car as if they had done this 100 times before. At the passenger door, Liam hesitated only a second, then popped it open. Warm, air spilled out, carrying the faint smell of old fries and coffee from long shifts and rushed dinners. The dog paused at the threshold, snow melting on the rubber mat below. His breath came out in slow, steady clouds, eyes flicking once to Liam's face, as if asking for final confirmation. Liam gave it to him in the simplest way possible. His voice softened almost into a whisper. "Come on, buddy," he said. "Up you go." The dog stepped forward and climbed into the car. No tugging, no pushing, no treats, no tricks. He simply accepted the invitation. Liam closed the door gently and walked around to the driver's side, his heart beating strangely fast for a man who had just helped a stray off the street. Once back inside, he stole a quick glance at the passenger seat. The dog had turned in a slow circle on the seat and then lay down, paws tucked under, tail curled near his flank, as if the patrol car were just another checkpoint on a long journey. "Well," Liam exhaled, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "That was the easiest arrest I've ever made." The dog didn't react to the joke, but his ears twitched again, and he seemed to settle more comfortably into the seat. From this angle, Liam could see the metal tag on the collar better. When the light turned red at the next intersection, he reached over carefully and swung the tag up with 2 fingers. The engraving was scratched but still legible under the wear. Ranger. Something about the name felt right. Strong, quiet. Built for long nights and hard weather. "Ranger, huh?" Liam murmured, the word sitting easily on his tongue. The dog, Ranger now, turned his head, as if recognizing the sound of his own name spoken by a different voice. "All right, Ranger," Liam said, a small, sincere warmth blooming in his chest despite the storms outside. "Looks like you just joined the night shift." As the patrol car rolled back into the softly falling snow, Winterfield passed by in blurred streaks of yellow lamps and white drifts. Inside the car, man and dog sat side by side, one staring at the road ahead, the other watching the world slip by through the window, their reflections briefly overlapping on the glass. Somewhere between one intersection and the next, between the cold outside and the warmth inside, something began, not with a siren, not with a shout, but with a quiet decision made by 2 tired souls on a winter night, to share the same road, at least for a while. Winterfield awoke the next morning beneath a tired, pale sunrise. The snow had stopped, but its afterglow lingered, thick along rooftops, soft across yards, and piled in silent ridges along sidewalks. As Patrol Car 27 rolled into the driveway of a modest 2-story home with cream-colored siding and a sagging porch step, the world seemed to hold its breath for the meeting that was about to happen. Officer Liam Carter parked the cruiser and glanced at his passenger seat. Ranger was awake, alert but calm, ears angled slightly as if he already knew this. Next part of the journey required composure. Liam opened the passenger door, and Ranger stepped out gracefully. There was something dignified in his movement, something that suggested training or heritage. He didn't yank the leash. He didn't even need a leash. He walked beside Liam as they approached the front door. Inside the house was Sarah Carter, Liam's wife. Sarah was 33, tall and willowy with soft auburn hair, usually twisted into a loose bun. Her eyes were a gentle green, steady and perceptive, the kind of eyes that mothers often develop from years of watching over their children. Sarah moved through life with a warm manner but a protective instinct that ran deep, a trait shaped by her childhood in a foster home where she learned early to guard what little she had and cherish those who depended on her. She had a quiet strength that didn't need to be loud to be felt. At the door, she wiped her hands on her jeans and looked at Liam with raised eyebrows. "Back already? Night shift that easy?" Liam hesitated. "I brought someone home." The door swung wider. Ranger stepped into the warm air of the house. Sarah stared. Her protective instincts sharpened instantly. Her expression didn't turn hostile, but alert. "Liam," she said slowly, "that is not a someone. That's a German shepherd. Am I wrong?" Liam spoke quickly. "He's not dangerous. He's calm, trained, smart. I couldn't leave him out there." Ranger didn't bark. He didn't push forward. He simply sat at the entryway like a respectful guest, tail resting on the floor, gaze steady. For a moment, Sarah's eyes softened despite herself, because she recognized that look. She'd seen it once in a foster home, in a child who never asked for anything but silently hoped someone might stay. Then, "Mommy!" Tiny footsteps thundered from the living room, and Emily Carter appeared, a 5-year-old girl with a mess of curly blonde hair, cheeks round and rosy, and eyes that seemed built entirely of joy and wonder. Emily was a lively child with a voice like bells, and an unusual emotional sensitivity for her age. She noticed when people were sad, when animals were frightened, when grown-ups forced a smile. Emily froze. Her eyes widened. "That's a wolf dog!" She squealed with excitement rather than fear. Sarah started, "Emily, honey, wait." But Ranger had already risen to his feet. He walked toward the little girl slowly, each step deliberate, and Emily, fearless, stepped forward to meet him. She stretched out a small, mitten-soft hand. Ranger lowered his head and gently pressed his muzzle into her palm. Emily giggled, a bright, musical sound. "He likes me! Daddy! He really likes me!" Liam leaned against the doorframe, relief unspooling in him like thawed tension. He knew this was the moment that mattered. More than his reasoning, more than Sarah's caution. This was the soul check. And Ranger passed. Sarah exhaled and crossed her arms, not in defiance, but in surrender to the inevitable. "All right," she said. "But he stays downstairs, not on the beds, not on the sofa." Ranger walked over and sat beside Emily. Emily wrapped her arms around his neck like he was made of velvet and trust. "And," Sarah added, "I suppose he can stay for breakfast." Liam chuckled. "That's the most merciful verdict a guy could hope for." Inside the house, warmth bloomed. The fireplace crackled. Emily chattered cheerfully to Ranger about stuffed animals and her favorite shows. Ranger listened in silence, not understanding words, but understanding tone and affection. Later that morning, Liam called a local vet clinic to ask about checking for a microchip. This brought Dr. Harold Whitmore into the story. A retired veterinarian now, 61 years old, with thinning gray hair and deep laugh lines. He was short, square-shouldered, always smelling faintly of peppermint, with a straightforward personality. Years working with injured animals had softened parts of him, but hardened others. He had no patience for cruelty, neglect, or ignorance, but endless love for anything with fur and heartbeat. At the clinic, Whitmore knelt beside Ranger and ran the scanner. No microchip. He gave a low hum and scratched Ranger's ears. "He's healthy, a little undernourished, but not bad. And trained, I'd wager. Look how he watches. Most dogs watch the room. This one watches people. That's trained behavior." Liam nodded. "He chose to get in my car. Didn't hesitate." Whitmore studied Ranger thoughtfully. "Not stray, abandoned, or lost. And I'll tell you something, officer. He's bonded to you already. See how he stays close to your hip? He's chosen you." Those words landed in Liam's chest with quiet, undeniable truth. When they returned home, Sarah was in the kitchen stirring pancake batter. She glanced sideways at Ranger, who now walked freely through the house. Not recklessly. He moved with careful awareness, as if he understood walls, furniture, fragile things. Sarah sighed and turned to Liam. "He's surprisingly polite." "That's what I said," she smirked. "Don't start. One of you being well-behaved is enough." Ranger lay at the foot of the kitchen table while they ate. Every so often, he looked up at Emily, who giggled each time. When breakfast ended, Ranger padded over to his new resting place, a patch of sunlit floor near the fireplace, and curled himself there like a quiet guardian. From that moment on, he wasn't just in the house. He belonged in the house. As afternoon sunlight began turning honey-colored, Liam sat on the couch, one hand absently resting on Ranger's back. Sarah sat beside him, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Are we keeping him?" she asked. Liam didn't answer immediately. He looked at Ranger, who seemed half asleep, but lifted his eyes when he heard Liam's voice. "I don't know where he came from," Liam said quietly, "but I know where he belongs now." Ranger's amber eyes softened, lids drooping. Emily wandered over and lay down next to him, small hand resting on his shoulder. "Ranger is part of our pack now," she whispered as if speaking an ancient vow. Outside, snow glittered in the fading light. Inside, warmth settled like a blessing. And so, in that winter-soft afternoon, without ceremony or signatures, without words or conditions, a family quietly grew larger, not by blood, but by choice. Winterfield slipped deeper into February in the days that followed, and, although the snow thinned on streets and sidewalks, the air carried a stubborn bitterness, sharp enough to sting the lungs if one breathed too deeply. Inside the Carter home, warmth and routine wove themselves lazily through mornings and evenings. Ranger settled into family life with a quiet dignity. He rose when Liam rose, padded softly behind Sarah through the kitchen in the morning, and curled beside Emily each afternoon while she played on the carpet with crayons and picture books. Emily was always chatty, a 5-year-old songbird, but Ranger rarely barked. He communicated through gentle gestures, a lifted ear, a tilted head, a warm lean of his shoulder against a child's small frame. He had become her shadow and her silent night. But in the 4th week after Ranger's arrival, something began to change, quietly at first. Emily had always been the spark of the household, laughing often, skipping through rooms, humming little melodies that sounded like springtime in a winter world. But one cold morning, she sat at the dining table with her pancake and didn't eat. Sarah leaned over, touching her forehead lightly. "You feeling okay, sweet pea?" Emily looked up, eyes tired in a way a child's eyes should never be. "My throat feels scratchy, and I'm cold." Ranger, lying near her chair, raised his head slowly, his amber eyes fixed on her, as if detecting something shifting beneath skin and breath. He inched closer until his chin rested on her knee. Sarah ran a thermometer gently along Emily's forehead. 99.1. Not alarming, but not nothing. "It's probably just a bug," Sarah said to Liam later, though worry tugged at the edges of her voice. "Kids get these things." But the next day Emily coughed, the day after she coughed harder, a dry, persistent rasp that sounded far too adult for her small chest. Liam wanted to dismiss it too. A cough, a cold, normal. But Ranger's behavior made that impossible. He stopped moving freely about the house. Instead, he stayed glued to Emily, even when she slept. He would lie facing her, ears perked even when his eyes closed, as if guarding against something unseen. Late one night, when the house was quiet and the world outside lay sleeping under frost, Liam woke to the sound of a harsh cough echoing from Emily's room. He climbed the stairs swiftly. Ranger was already there, standing beside the bed, tail low, body tense. Emily was awake, coughing painfully, small fists pressed to her chest. Liam lifted her gently and rubbed her back, but the cough wouldn't stop. Sarah rushed in, face pale with maternal alarm. They drove to the clinic first. A general exam, a suggestion of rest, hydration, standard advice. But the cough worsened over the next 2 days, joined by fatigue. The spark faded. The child who once twirled in living room sunlight now sat curled beneath blankets, face pale, eyes quiet. On the second night of this downturn, Liam stepped outside onto the porch, snow crunching beneath his boots. Ranger followed silently. Liam stared out at the white yard, moonlight streaking silver across the stone walkway. He exhaled slowly. "You know something's wrong, don't you?" he said softly. Ranger didn't bark. He simply pressed himself against Liam's leg, leaning his weight as if anchoring Liam against the worry drifting through him like cold wind. By the 5th day, Emily was no better. She coughed in bouts, long, tiring ones. She wasn't hungry, she wasn't energetic, she wasn't singing. Sarah's jokes faltered. Liam's police calm began to fray. Even the walls of the house felt like they leaned inward, as if trying to listen. Finally, hospital. Winterfield Children's Ward. The drive there was painfully quiet. Emily wrapped in a soft pink blanket. Sarah holding her small hand tightly. Liam gripping the steering wheel too hard. Ranger watched from the front window as they left. He whined, a low, soft sound. But he stayed behind because the door had closed and rules existed. Hours later, while Emily was admitted and examined under white lights and measured voices, Ranger paced the house. He pawed at Emily's closed bedroom door. He circled the living room. He returned to the door. Then, he sat at the front entrance, staring at it. He waited. The night deepened. Eventually, Liam came home, exhausted, eyes red from lack of sleep. When he opened the door, Ranger pushed forward, sniffing anxiously at his jacket, smelling hospital disinfectant, worry, echoes of tears. "She's staying overnight," Liam said softly, voice strained. "They're running tests. They think it could be respiratory infection, maybe pneumonia." Sarah stayed at the hospital. Liam stayed home, because duty, both police and parental, sometimes forced impossible splits. Ranger stayed by the door the entire night. The next evening, Liam returned to the hospital alone. Visiting hours were strict. He told Ranger to stay. Ranger's ears flattened. He didn't sit. He didn't lie down. He ran through the small gap before the door fully latched, down the porch steps, across winter grass. And Liam, stunned, sprinted after him. But Ranger was fast. He cut across 3 front yards, bounded over a snowbank, and vanished into the streetlight haze. "Ranger!" Liam yelled. His voice echoed into the cold. When Liam reached the hospital 20 minutes later, breath heavy, he saw a shape near the entrance under falling snow. Ranger, sitting still, facing the glass doors, waiting. Pedestrians walked past cautiously, but no one touched him. They could sense this moment had purpose. Liam approached, both furious and moved. "You stubborn dog," he whispered. But Ranger didn't look. At him, he kept staring inside, toward the corridor where Emily slept. Inside the hospital, doctors came and went with neutral professionalism. Nurses took vitals. Machines beeped quietly. Sarah stroked Emily's hair and whispered fairy tale fragments to soothe her. Emily, feverish, asked weakly, "Is Ranger coming?" Sarah hesitated, throat tightening. "He wants to," she said. And Ranger, outside, as if hearing that through stone and glass, pressed one paw gently against the door, a gesture of insistence or love. Liam spoke with the night nurse, Nurse Martina Delgado, a 42-year-old Hispanic woman, short and round-faced with kind eyes and a brisk manner. She'd worked pediatric wards for nearly 2 decades. She wasn't easily shaken. She was compassionate but firm. She had the air of someone who had survived losses and learned to carry hope like a candle in a storm. Liam explained what Ranger had done. She looked through the glass at the waiting dog and sighed. "That animal knows something," she murmured. "Sometimes you don't ignore that." But rules were rules. No animals inside. At 1 a.m., Liam had to carry Ranger back to the car. Ranger didn't fight, but he looked back at the door, eyes deep with longing and refusal to accept separation. When they returned home, Ranger didn't go to his spot by the fireplace. He sat by the front door again and stayed, guarding, listening, waiting, as if he could hear Emily's cough across miles. The next morning, Liam called the hospital again. Emily's condition had not worsened, but had not improved. Ranger refused food, refused rest. He remained at the threshold, his eyes no longer amber, but ember, burning with a quiet vow. And so, the chapter closes with a fragile balance, a sick child in a sterile ward, a worried family divided between home and hospital, a devoted dog who refuses to be dismissed by distance or locked doors, and winter, silent, bearing witness. The third morning in the hospital dawned iron gray and muted, as if even the sky was tired. Ice crusted the edges of windows, turning the outside world into a blurred watercolor of white and frost. Inside Winterfield Children's Hospital, the hallways hummed with quiet footsteps, distant monitors, and the muffled coughs of children battling winter illnesses. Emily lay in her small hospital bed, a pale pink blanket covering her legs, an IV line taped carefully to her wrist. Her cheeks had lost their color, and dark circles pooled beneath her eyes. She coughed less violently than before, but each cough still sounded like it rattled too deep in her chest. Beside her sat Dr. Evelyn Hart, a pediatric pulmonologist of 45 years, tall and composed, with hair streaked in dignified silver. Her face bore the soft wrinkles of someone who smiled often, but today her expression leaned toward concern. Dr. Hart had the quiet authority of a physician who knew when to apply science and when to listen to intuition. She had once lost a young patient early in her career, a loss that reshaped her entirely. It taught her to treat children not as medical cases, but as lives full of story, joy, and dreams. She checked Emily's lungs with a stethoscope, frowning at the lingering roughness in breath. "She's stable," Dr. Hart murmured to Liam and Sarah, who sat nearby, sleep-deprived and drained. "But recovery isn't moving as quickly as we'd hoped. We need her mood to improve. Her body will follow." Sarah stroked Emily's hair, voice barely rising above a whisper. "She wants Ranger?" That name hung in the air like a plea. Dr. Hart had heard of Ranger by now, from nurses, from Liam, and from the hospital staff who had seen a German shepherd sitting outside in the cold with quiet devotion. She turned to Liam. "Is it true he hasn't left the entrance since you last brought Emily?" Liam nodded, tired disbelief in his voice. "He waits by the front door, all night, every night. He hardly eats, he hardly moves." A silence followed, full of weight, but not despair. Dr. Hart exhaled slowly. "We don't normally allow animals in the pediatric wing unless they're certified therapy dogs." That "unless" was the hinge of the moment. Sarah leaned forward, voice trembling with quiet hope. "He's gentle, he's calm. He's bonded to her in a way I don't fully understand." Dr. Hart considered this, eyes distant. She had seen strange connections before. A child with epilepsy whose seizures calmed only when his cat purred against him. A teenager with bone disease who laughed only when she could brush her family's old farm dog. There were places medicine could reach, and places where something older, softer, more ancient had better effect. Finally, she said, "Let me speak to administration and infection control." Sarah clasped her hands together in prayerful gratitude. Liam closed his eyes briefly, as if letting a wave of relief pass through him. Meanwhile, outside the hospital, Ranger sat through another winter morning, snow dusting over his back like a white veil. Nurses passed by and murmured sympathy. Some paused to pet him gently through gloves. But Ranger's gaze stayed fixed inside the doors, pointed at a place of longing only he seemed able to identify. That afternoon, a hospital administrator named Gregory Henson, a man of 50 with a stiff posture and a corporate voice, met with Dr. Hart. He wasn't unkind, just methodical. Rules were rules. Liability was liability. He had the look of a man who believed systems were meant to protect, but sometimes forgot that people were the ones being protected. Dr. Hart stood her ground. "That child needs emotional stimulation, something to encourage healing. Without it, recovery will be longer, possibly riskier." Henson frowned. "If we allow this once, we create precedent." Dr. Hart softened. "Good. Let our precedent be compassion." The argument went back and forth, but eventually, approval came, conditional but real. Vaccination records needed, clean paws, controlled contact. Liam rushed home to retrieve the old vet file they had from Dr. Whitmore, records of vaccinations and health evaluations for Ranger. The documents were marked with the clinic's letterhead, official and reassuring. He returned swiftly. Ranger watched as Liam approached the entrance again, tail thumping against the ground for the first time in days. Inside, the final preparations were made. Ranger was bathed with warm disinfectant wipes by Nurse Delgado, who laughed softly as Ranger patiently tolerated the indignity. "I've got human patients who complain more than you do," she murmured. They slipped a small laminated card onto his collar. "Therapy visitor. Special exemption." Finally, the moment came. Liam clipped a gentle lead onto Ranger's collar, though it wasn't really needed, and together they walked through the automatic hospital doors. The lobby quieted. A few parents blinked in surprise. Some kids smiled. One toddler pointed and said, "Doggy." But Ranger didn't look left or right. His paws clicked softly against linoleum floors as he followed one unbroken compass line toward Emily's room. Nurse Delgado led the way, and around the corner of the pediatric wing corridor, a tiny figure sat up in her bed, pale, exhausted, but suddenly alert, as if sensing something shifting in the air. Emily's whisper came first. "Ranger?" And then he appeared. Ranger stopped at the threshold just a moment, as if asking permission with his eyes. Dr. Hart nodded, and he stepped inside. Emily's face broke into a smile, fragile but radiant. the kind of smile that thawed the cold in every adult heart present. Ranger walked softly to her bedside, lifted his head, and pressed his muzzle lightly onto her small hand. Emily sighed, a tiny, relieved breath, and her shoulders loosened. Sarah wiped tears silently. Liam stood still, afraid to blink, lest the moment disappear. Even Dr. Hart's measured expression eased, gentled. Emily spoke softly. "I missed you." Ranger didn't reply, but he didn't need words. His eyes held the vow. His presence carried the proof. For the next hour, Ranger remained beside Emily, half on the bed, half on a padded mat. The nurses slid underneath him. Emily stroked his ears, rested her head against his chest, and even giggled once. A weak giggle, but a real one. A nurse passing by overheard Dr. Hart quietly telling Liam, "Positive emotional response lowers cortisol and adrenaline. It can stabilize immune response and improve respiratory recovery." Science validated what ancient companionship already knew. Love heals. As evening fell and the sky outside faded into indigo, Ranger lay curled at the foot of Emily's bed, eyes half closed, still alert. Emily slept peacefully, truly peacefully, for the first time in days. And so, the hospital wing fell quiet. Lights dimmed, monitors hummed softly. And in one small room, a girl and her guardian shared a silent bond that wrapped around them like a warm blanket, stronger than winter, stronger than fear. The following days unfolded like the slow, careful unwrapping of a long-awaited gift. Winterfield was still locked in late winter chill, with frost threading across windows each dusk. But inside room 214 of the children's ward, a different season had begun. Warmth, gentle, invisible, reassuring, radiated around the small hospital bed where Emily lay. No longer pale with fear, but gently colored with the first hints of returning life. Emily's breathing had grown steadier. Her cough, though still present, rasped less violently. Nurses walking the corridor would glance in and find her giggling softly as Ranger nudged her elbow or rested his heavy head across her lap. The quiet miracle lay not only in medicine, but in connection. Dr. Hart conducted rounds each morning. On this particular morning, she entered with a clipboard tucked beneath one arm. She addressed Emily first, not the parents, not the patient chart, but Emily, as though the girl was her own collaborator in the healing process. "How's our snow princess today?" she asked. Emily smiled shyly. "Better. Ranger keeps the bad dreams away." Ranger lay on his side beside the bed, eyes half closed, but ears alert. At the sound of Emily's voice, he lifted his head and gently nudged her wrist with his nose. Then Dr. Hart glanced at Liam and Sarah. "I'd like to share something with you," she said, tone shifting into quiet professionalism. She turned the stethoscope in her hand as though it were both instrument and metaphor. The immune system is heavily influenced by neurochemistry. When a patient experiences fear, isolation, or hopelessness, cortisol levels rise. Prolonged stress weakens immune defenses. But when a patient experiences emotional comfort, companionship, laughter, cortisol drops. The body becomes more efficient at healing. Sarah nodded slowly. "So, Ranger isn't just comforting her. He's physically helping her recover." "Yes," Dr. Hart smiled. "Love is measurable, at least in effect." Ranger looked up at Dr. Hart with a solemn, knowing gaze, as if acknowledging the truth. Each afternoon, new rituals formed. Nurse Delgado would bring in a shallow bowl of water for Ranger and jokingly greet him, "Time for hydration, Senior Guardian." Gregory Henson, the administrator who once resisted the idea, now stopped by occasionally just to marvel silently at the scene. He wasn't the type to admit emotional impact freely, but he felt it. He'd stand for a minute with arms folded, then simply nod once and walk away, humbled by something larger than policy. Children from neighboring rooms often asked if they could see the dog. When permitted, they came by one or two at a time, shy, curious, hopeful. Ranger would allow them to pet him gently, but he always returned to Emily afterward, as though she remained his operational priority. Once, a 7-year-old boy named Marcus, recovering from appendicitis, was allowed to visit. Marcus knelt beside Ranger, scratching behind his ears. "Why does he like Emily best?" the boy asked. Ranger lifted his head, gaze sliding to Emily. Emily answered simply, "Because he's my best friend." Marcus nodded with childlike acceptance, the kind that doesn't require logic to validate truth. But healing isn't linear. There was one night, the sixth since Ranger's admission, when Emily's temperature ticked slightly upward again. Sarah's worry flared. "She was getting better," she whispered anxiously. Dr. Hart reassured her calmly. "Illness often fights back in small waves, but she's stronger now. She'll beat it." And indeed, that night, Ranger demonstrated the strange intuition he carried. Emily stirred restlessly in her sleep, breath shallow, brow damp. Ranger rose silently and stepped closer, positioning himself against her side. He rested his head on her arm, and her breathing slowly deepened. Sarah witnessed this, a moment of instinctive caregiving, and tears slipped down her cheeks, quietly, reverently. She whispered into the dim room, "You're not just a dog, you're a guardian." The next morning, Emily awoke with more energy than she'd had in days. She sat up in bed holding a small plastic hairbrush. "Mommy, can I brush Ranger?" Sarah gave a theatrical sigh. "All right, but only if he agrees." Ranger didn't move away when Emily pressed the brush gently through his thick fur. He accepted the grooming with dignity, tail thumping lightly. Nurse Delgado paused outside the door and muttered, "I swear that dog understands English, Spanish, and the language of love." Dr. Hart smiled at that comment later and responded thoughtfully, "Maybe he just understands children because they speak honestly." There was an evening when Liam had to return to his police shift. He leaned down to kiss Emily's forehead. "Daddy has to work tonight, sweetheart. You'll be all right with Mommy and Ranger, okay?" "Okay," Emily answered, her voice playful. "But Ranger is in charge." Liam chuckled. "That's actually correct." Then he crouched beside Ranger, and for a moment, man and dog regarded each other as equals in shared responsibility. "You look after her," Liam said softly. Ranger blinked slowly and offered a quiet huff, almost like a promise. Later that same night, a small scene unfolded that would stay with Sarah for the rest of her life. Emily was fast asleep, soft breath steady. Sarah sat dozing in the visitor's chair. A draft leaked through the window seam, a chill creeping into the room. Ranger rose, padded toward Sarah, and nudged her hand gently. She looked up sleepily. "What is it?" Ranger then walked to the bed, gazed at Emily, then looked back at Sarah. It wasn't a bark, it wasn't an alarm. It was communication, simple and clear. Sarah rose, checked the bedding, and saw that the blanket had shifted, leaving Emily's shoulder exposed. She pulled it up and tucked it properly around her. Ranger lay down again. Sarah whispered, "You're amazing." Finally, on the 8th morning, Dr. Hart reviewed Emily's vitals, listened to her lungs, and smiled broadly. "Her breathing has normalized. Oxygen saturation is excellent. Fever is gone. I believe we'll see full recovery soon." Emily beamed. Ranger thumped his tail. Liam hugged Sarah tightly. Dr. Hart gently scratched Ranger's chin and murmured, "You did good work, friend." The dog's amber eyes closed halfway, accepting the praise with quiet grace. That evening, as the sun faded into peach and lavender streaks beyond the hospital windows, Emily lay against Ranger's warm side, her fingers tangled into his fur. She whispered, "You made the sick go away." Ranger didn't move, but his breathing rumbled quietly like a living lullaby, and for the first time, the room felt not like a place of illness, but like a place of healing, a sanctuary, a circle of warmth in winter. And in that hush, full of gentle breaths and soft animal presence, the true medicine of the heart completed its work. Winterfield thawed gradually, like a stiff muscle waking from sleep. The icicles on roof edges shrank day by day, dripping steadily into little puddles along the pavement. The sky lightened, trading its heavy winter gray for a gentler shade of pale blue. And inside the hospital, room 214 grew quieter, not in sorrow, but in relief. Emily sat upright in her hospital bed, cheeks flushed with returning life. The IV had been removed yesterday, The fever was gone. The cough had dwindled to an occasional reminder, nothing more. She wore her lime green sweater, the one Sarah had brought from home, and her hair had regained the bounce that had been lost during the worst of the illness. But more than anything, her eyes sparkled again, full of curiosity, wonder, and sunshine. Ranger lay by her side as usual, head resting on his paws, eyes half-lidded in contentment. But he was attuned as always, not sleeping, just resting. Dr. Evelyn Hart entered with her usual confident stride, though today her smile was wider than it had ever been. "Well, Emily," she said, "I think it's time to talk about something rather exciting." Emily sat straighter, hands clasped in anticipation. "It's time to go home." The little girl gasped and then beamed. She turned to Ranger as if he were not just her friend, but the reason her heart had strength again. "We're going home, Ranger! We're going home!" Ranger wagged his tail, not wildly, but with a slow, proud rhythm, as if acknowledging the triumphant conclusion of a mission he had never doubted. Liam and Sarah were already there, and Sarah quickly stepped forward to embrace Dr. Hart. Sarah was normally composed, but now her gratitude broke through, raw and overflowing. "Thank you, Doctor," she whispered. "Thank you for seeing beyond the rules." Dr. Hart returned the embrace warmly, patting her back. "Thank your daughter's spirit, and thank her guardian." She glanced at Ranger. "Sometimes medicine isn't only found in bottles." Gregory Henson appeared at the doorway. He cleared his throat, awkwardly, like a man unaccustomed to emotional declarations. "We've had discussions among the board," he said, "and considering the impact Ranger has had, and witnessing the effect on other children as well, we'd like to formally invite Ranger to participate in an ongoing pet therapy program at the hospital." Liam blinked. "Officially?" "Yes," Henson said. "With scheduled visits, supervised access, and, well, a badge." Nurse Delgado clapped her hands once and grinned. "I told you he was special." Emily held Ranger's face between her little palms. "You're going to help all the kids, boy." Ranger closed his eyes gently, leaning into her touch. It felt like a quiet vow, one chapter ending and another beginning. But there was still the matter of leaving. Sarah helped Emily into her boots. Liam gathered, discharge papers in a folder. Nurses drifted in and out, each wanting to say goodbye, or maybe just goodbye for now. Marcus, the appendicitis boy, appeared in the doorway with a small paper drawing, a stick figure Emily, and a big scribbled German shepherd with a superhero cape. "It's Ranger Man," he explained solemnly. Emily giggled and hugged the paper. Ranger didn't understand the art, but seemed very pleased with the attention. Finally, it was time. Emily climbed into a wheelchair for the exit, hospital policy for discharges, and Ranger walked beside it like an assigned escort. His movement was smooth, dignified, attentive. Even the security guard at the front desk smiled as they passed. When the doors slid open, the late winter air touched their faces. Not cold anymore, just cool, brisk, alive. Emily breathed deeply as though greeting the world again. "It smells like outside," she said softly. Outside, alive, homeward. Liam opened the back door of the car. Ranger jumped in first, then Emily climbed in beside him, not needing instruction. Ranger pressed close to her, not in worry now, but in belonging. The drive home was different from the drive to the hospital. There was no fear, no tension, only relief, and the warm exhaustion that follows victory. Winterfield slid past in small-town familiarity. White fences, quiet houses, lawns slowly emerging from beneath receding snow. When they reached the house, something subtle but beautiful happened. Emily stepped out of the car, shaky but determined. Ranger hopped out and walked forward into the yard, but paused. He didn't run to explore. He didn't trot around excitedly. He turned back, waited for Emily, and when she placed her foot on the porch step, he moved forward with her. Inside the house, something stirred, like the settling of missing pieces back into place. The kitchen, the walls, the carpet, the fireplace, all felt warmer with Emily there again. Emily curled up on the sofa, Ranger on the floor beside her, head on her feet. Sarah brought soup and crackers. Liam lit the fireplace. The house breathed again. A week later, the official moment came. They returned to the hospital, not for treatment, but for welcome. Ranger wore a new collar tag that jingled faintly. Ranger, Pet Therapy Team. Gregory Henson handed Ranger a laminated badge with a little clip, purely ceremonial, but meaningful, Therapy Dog. Certified guest nurse Delgado took pictures. Dr. Hart gave a speech that was short but heartfelt. In medicine, we aim to heal the body, but sometimes the heart heals first, and the body follows. Ranger reminded us that care is not only clinical, it is relational, it is emotional, it is love. Ranger stood calmly as children came to pet him, smiling through oxygen tubes or wheelchair frames. And Emily, quietly proud, watched as her guardian became guardian to many. That night, back home, Liam tucked Emily into bed. Ranger settled into his old place, by her feet. Emily whispered sleepily into the dark, "Don't worry, buddy, I'll always need you." Ranger sighed gently, eyes closing. And in that moment, beneath a soft blanket of night, with Winterfield exhaling into early spring, a vow was sealed, wordless and timeless, between child and dog. Not every love needs language to be understood. In the quiet closing of this story, we are reminded that the miracles of God do not always arrive with thunder or bright signs. Sometimes they come softly through the devotion of a loyal dog, through the courage of a family that refuses to give up, and through the healing love that God places inside ordinary hearts. In our everyday lives, we each face moments of fear, doubt, or sadness. But God walks beside us even then, guiding our steps, sending comfort in unexpected forms, and reminding us that we are never alone. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who may need encouragement today. Leave a comment below to tell us your thoughts and type Amen if you believe in the quiet miracles God sends. May God bless you and your loved ones with peace, protection, and strength. And please remember to support the channel by pressing subscribe so we can continue bringing stories of faith, hope, and gentle redemption to you and many others.